Lurking beneath the streets of Washington, D.C. is a group that seems to have no affiliation to any of the known factions in both cities that we've come across. Encounters are infrequent and brutal. Although they seem to dwell in D.C.'s sewer system, they can sometimes be seen scavenging above ground, presumably looking for supplies. This group is known by many names, like the Unchained, Sewer People, Chain Gang, and the Silent Ones. But officially, in-game they can be seen called the Underground. In this video I'll be discussing the possible origins of the Underground faction, based on the information found both in the Division 1 and 2. Very little is known about the Underground faction, other than they live as sewer dwellers, only coming up to the surface to gather supplies. They are hostile to everyone they encounter, and perhaps the most creepy thing about them is that they're almost completely silent. All you can hear is footsteps and the rattling of chains. The Underground are identified by their all-black clothing, and bright yellow flashlights they wear on their heads. Given the location that they can be found, and the fact that they don't seem to make a sound, it's not unusual to be within a couple of meters of them before you realise they're there. There are certain areas they can be found more often than not, but there is no saying how many of them are around. Quite often you'll come across a single unit to be quickly ambushed by a group of them flanking you from behind. Underground assault class units are armed with semi-automatics, but they also have rusher type units who are quick and will either throw knives from a distance or rush into close combat. Unique to the Underground are their thrower class, who throw chemical grenades that apply a damage effect that ignores armour. But probably the most memorable member of the Underground group are the Heavies. A hulking behemoth covered in chains, running straight at you wielding nothing else but a chainsaw. Within the main story there are just 2 missions that actually feature the Underground in some way. During the Beekeeper Jeff side mission, right after you start talking to Jeff, the Underground faction immediately launch an attack. After fighting them back, you're able to proceed and exit the mission without another word spoken about this mysterious group that laid siege to the capital's last line of defense. Again, while running through the Navy Hill transmission side mission, the Underground faction can be seen. When exiting the Navy Hill bunker, the Underground faction are waiting. In both of these instances, no extra information about this faction is given. Again, it just shows their activity and aggression beneath the streets of Washington, D.C. There's a lot of speculation around these guys, with the majority of people talking about how they're offshoots of the Outcasts. A lot of this comes from the way that they look. The Outcasts have a very loose uniform that was thrown together after capturing Roosevelt Island from their captives, after spending months as prisoners. As a group that has established itself underground, it's easy to understand that finding clothing etc. could be difficult. And given that it isn't the most clean of environments, the uniform, if you want to call it that, is likely to be in a similar rugged state. Other than this and their love for chemical warfare, that's where their similarity ends. Another theory doing the rounds is that they're affiliated with the Hunters in some way. Not necessarily a part of the same faction, but people who worship them, kind of like Hunter groupies. When the Hunters first appeared in New York City, no one knew anything about them. Months later, we still have no idea. So naturally, rumours start. Appearing from behind smoke, wearing masks to strike fear into their enemies, strong enough to take down the most hardened of agents, and then before anyone can react, they disappear without a trace. This is the sort of thing that legends are made out of. So it wouldn't be unreasonable to suspect that there's some sort of following being gained. Desperate times call for desperate measures. This underground following does seem to have been inspired by them in some way. They're quiet, they can never be heard talking, they wear a lot of dark clothing to keep them hidden in the dark, they have adopted the use of ambush tactics, and prefer a more brutal, close combat style of fighting. I love the idea behind this one. It brings the multiple speculations around Hunters that we've had in real life over the last couple of years straight back into the game, where the affected civilians are having the same sort of discussions. Who are they? Where did they come from? Now for a theory a little more in line with the story. As factions have come to power and etched out parts of the city as their territory, settlements in the JTF were put under pressure. They were unable to take on more civilians looking for shelter, and in fact were struggling to hold what they already had. Members of society who were unable to seek refuge in these areas took to places that weren't actively being patrolled by the main hostile factions. One of these places is under the streets of Washington, D.C. Given the knowledge of the area and their equipment, it's possible that it started as a group of city workers that had originally started working down there, who then set up a camp underground to keep themselves safe from what was going on above. They stay down there because they simply do not have the numbers to take on the other factions, especially now with the Black Tusk on the scene. They have been cut off from everything, and after several months without communication, they are suspicious of everyone. Their plan is to wait it out, to live quietly underground, away from everyone else, until the surface is safe again. This theory shows the deeper side to how the public have been affected by the fall of society, and how they'll cling to anything in hopes to survive. It also paints them in a far less hostile light. They're simply trying to survive, defending themselves, only as a way to protect their underground community. But I'm going to take this theory a little bit further. I'm going to show how the underground faction is a straight reference to the side stories surrounding the Division 1. Anyone familiar with the underground in the Division 1 might remember some of the recordings that could be found. I won't play them all, just some of the relevant ones to re-jog your memory.
So far, Mary and Case seem alright. I mean, they're alive, which is more than I can say for anyone else I know. Number one criteria for friendship these days, being alive. Shitty standard, right? Still, they have some crazy ideas. Like going into the underground to live. Like the sewers and subways. They say there's too many gangs up here. Too many predators. And they're not wrong. They got a stash of food they say we can leave up here and collect from every now and then. Supply runs. They're convinced it's the way to go, and they're the ones with the food. Not to mention, without them, I have no one. So, I guess we're going under. Haven't run into anyone for a few days now. Friendlies or not. There's a hell of a lot of tunnels down here, so I guess you don't run into people so much. Which is a good thing, mostly. It's quieter than up top, sure, and it's also really boring. And dark and wet. We've told each other our life stories, and it kind of seems like we've been through everything there is to say already. We're quiet mostly now. Maybe this is just the beginning. The beginning of what, though, I'm not exactly sure.
That dream I had the other night, turns out, wasn't a dream. Okay, I get that this will sound crazy. I know it's going to sound crazy, but that doesn't mean it actually is crazy. I swear to God, I swear on Bible, I swear on Lorraine Barrett's hunting knife, anything you want, I swear I saw an alligator down here. Big one. I mean, I've heard those rumors for years. Years. I always thought it was bullshit. I'm a skeptic, I'm a realist. But man, I know what I saw. Alright, heard. But there's no faking that. Breathing like a dragon. Really heavy. And wet. And the footsteps and the drag of that tail like a huge bag of wet cement getting dragged down the tunnel. Holy shit.
Shift report. So, some of the guys have been saying they spotted people prying up the manhole covers at night, ducking into the sewers. Our guys were too far away to decontaminate, and it ain't easy to run in this gear. But they marked the manhole cover, and I've been trying to patrol the area, just in case anything or anyone pops up. As far as I'm concerned, anybody going down there is for sure infected. You don't hide when you got nothing to hide for.
So people in New York City were going down there as a way to hide from the violence above ground, but also because of the possibility of an escape from Manhattan Island. And after a period of time, they only got smarter with their hiding, and better at protecting their settlements. It wouldn't be unreasonable to expect that the people of DC had the same ideas. But what we're seeing in DC is the very same people, but 6 months later. Isolation, deathly quiet, disease, lack of natural light, starvation. These are all recipes for a person to lose oneself. The people of the underground have done what they could to survive. Normal people like you and I that have done things that we would have never considered as an option for survival. When compared to what society would consider normal, people who were able to survive the initial outbreak of the virus and managed to avoid being captured or killed by hostile factions that came to power had a new struggle to contend with: starvation. Under these terrible circumstances, with people around you dying of hunger, cannibalism seemed like a logical step to survival. A number of recordings reference the shortage of food and what people were doing to overcome this. And this was further talked about in April Kelleher's take on events in the New York Collapse book.
I hope I never get this desperate. Pirate Guy says there's crazy cults down in the tunnels, paddling around on kayaks they took from sporting goods stores. Cannibals. Next he'll say they're riding alligators and performing human sacrifices. And if he did, some people would believe him. The shock of the dollar bug has broken a lot of people.
On top of this, there is this area that can be found that shows what looks like some sort of rat sacrificing ritual site. Behind the table is a mural. This is actually an image of the author H.P. Lovecraft with one of his written creations, Cthulhu. For anyone not familiar with his work, one of his most well-known stories is Rats in the Walls. Summing it up, this is a story of an American named Delaporte, the last descendants of the Delaporte family, who moves to his ancestral estate in England following the death of his only son in World War I. To the dismay of nearby residents, he restores the estate, called Exham Priory. After moving in, Delaporte and his cat frequently hear sounds of rats scurrying behind the walls. Upon investigating further, and through the reoccurring dreams, Delaporte learns that his family maintained an underground city for centuries, where they raised generations of human cattle to supply their taste for human flesh. This really could just be me clutching at straws here, but it's an interesting reference nonetheless. So there you have it. Based on the non-existent information that we've been provided on the underground faction, it is in my opinion that they are simply a group of civilians that have done what they could to survive. They have set up a settlement underground away from the rest of society, away from the chaos and violence happening above ground, resorting to everything imaginable in order to survive. This has been implied by a number of recordings in New York, including the sightings of a huge alligator beneath the streets. I'd usually ask a question here about what you would do in this sort of situation, but in all honesty, none of us could ever know. And to be fair, I'd really rather not know how many of my viewers were that way inclined. Thank you very much for watching, I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers!